Okay, we're going to get started. Thank you again. I'm John Lucy from the Asset Sales Office, and a couple of little items. We still have time to collect cards. If you have any questions for our session after this, we only got a few yesterday, but we'll take questions orally as well. And also the evaluation forms. So if anybody has evaluation forms they want to turn in, please do that as well. And this first morning session is going to be with Marlene Robinson from Asset Sales and Jelani House from Novad Consulting on post-sale and post-sale reporting. So the two of them are going to start. Thanks.
Good morning. Again, I'm Marlene Robinson from the Asset Sales Office. This is Jelani House with Novad Consulting. Novad Consulting is our program financial advisor, and Jelani is a project manager with Novad Consulting, and also the person on the Novad team who leads the review and analysis of the post-sale data that we get back from purchasers. So my role in the post-sale process is I oversee it from the asset sales office, making sure that I communicate back to the purchasers any changes about post-sale reports, what the requirements are, and trying to make sure we get all those reports when they're due. We turn it over once we get them to Novad, and they really do the heavy lifting in terms of analyzing the data and getting down into the weeds of the data. The requirement for post-sale reporting is very, very important for transparency. We have to report back to our leadership what's going on with the program, as well as they report back out to the public. So it's very important that we get the information back from the purchasers. What you're required to report and when you report is in your CAA agreement, and that's the Conveyance, Assignment, and Assumption Agreement. That's you as the purchaser's agreement between you and HUD. And so on slide, I believe it's, 91, 2 on my slides. In section 209 and exhibit B1 of the post-sale report, of the CAA, is where you'll find what's required. Because I think for each sale, the initial due date for the first report is in the CAA, and then the schedule for all the reports thereafter is in there as well. So you should check the CAA. And reporting is so important to us that the purchaser should start thinking about reporting as soon as they know that they are the winning bidder. Begin to set up your infrastructure so you can gather over time, over the quarter, all that data, so when it's time to send it to us, we get it when it's due. Now, next slide, please. Okay, so we also provide training for purchasers. Okay. Little glitch here. Take off the badge. Thank you. We also provide training for purchasers on post-sale. So today we're not going to go deep into the weeds on post-sale reporting. Jelani's going to do that a little bit, but not to a great extent, because when you become a winning bidder, we can train you and walk you through the database, what we're trying to collect, when we need it. So once you find out that you're a winning bidder, we can set something up right away, and we can do it by phone. It's something that you don't necessarily have to come in for. But we have done formal training for all purchasers, and so should we make any major changes, we'll send out something for training for everyone. I think we're trying to move more in towards automation. And so that's something that I know Jelani's team is working on. So when that happens, there may be a different way that you'll have to upload the report. And in that instance, we would send something out and have training for everyone. Okay, what is the post-sale requirements? Okay, so post-sale report has evolved over time. I just want to say something about the schedule before I get into that. Right now, the schedule is quarterly, so if you could put up slide, yeah, that slide, thank you. Prior, purchasers used to report twice a year, and different purchasers had different due dates, and it just became kind of crazy. So now we have a standardized schedule, as you see on the board. So your due dates to us are July 1, October 1, January 1, and April 1 of each year. And you're reporting on a 3-month performance period. This January 2nd, we had about 85% compliance right off the bat, meaning that 85% of the purchasers submitted a post-sale report on time. And so it usually takes us like about maybe almost a month to get it up to 100% compliance, and that's too much time on our end. Meaning we email the purchasers. Usually a week before the report is due, I'll send out an email saying, you know, your post-sale report is due, friendly reminder. And then if I don't have it, say January 3rd or 4th when we go through, you'll get another email. If we get it and there's something wrong, we send an email out saying we got it, but this was missing, or please provide this update. But we're going to cut down on that 1 month time because it eats into our time to analyze the data and get the results up to our management. So we've spoken to our senior leadership, and right now, there's no like real penalty. What happens is if a purchaser hasn't given us the reports timely or is missing a report, and now they want to be bid in a sale, I'll say to them, okay, you're otherwise qualified to bid. We'll let them into the due diligence, but they won't be able to place a bid on bid day until they become compliant. But our management has indicated that we need to do something different than that to try to drive that we need to have those reports trying to get up to 100% compliance or due date. Even if something is wrong with the report, we really want to get to that point where we have all of them. We can always reach back out to the purchaser and say, this is the issue, this is how we fix it, and move forward. But we really are trying to get to the point where we get all of the data when we need the data. So I just want to drive that point home. Having this schedule really helps us to manage it. It helps us, we report out quarterly to our senior leadership, and they are going to be reporting out biannually in a public piece that goes out to the public on what's going on with this. And as you can tell, this is a big program, a lot of notes, so there are a lot of eyes on it, and so it's very important for us to let everyone know what is the status of these notes and what's going on with them. So with that, penalties? I said there was no real penalty before. I guess.
Specifically for failing to meet your NSO requirements.
Oh, yes, these are the penalties. I was like, there were penalties for not giving the reports? No, there are penalties if you don't meet your NSO requirements. So this is another reason why reporting is so important, because that's the only way that we know whether or not you're meeting those NSO requirements. You have to report that back to us. If you don't tell us, we don't know. And as you can see from what's on the board, there are liquidated damages for NSO disposition in excess of non-NSO thresholds. So I'm not going to go through all the damages because you can read that, but just know that there's some pretty stiff penalties if you don't meet those NSO outcomes, if you're an NSO purchaser. And you know, the only way for us to know is for you to report back to us. If you have any questions later on about what's on the penalty slide, or you want to call up, you know, you can always ask. But that's pretty much, you know.
Right. The NSO penalties, it's something that we monitor. When we receive reports from purchasers, we will look at sort of the percentages of the loans that have met a final NSO outcome. And based on that, we'll know whether or not we should be reaching out to individual purchasers and asking them, and sort of counseling them through and making sure that they're aware of these penalties so that, you know, we don't actually have to take any of these actions. So this is really a critical component. This is a critical driver of why, you know, this session itself is so important for us.
And let me just say one more thing. All purchasers report back to us, not just the NSO purchasers. So all purchasers report, and the reporting period is over a 48-month period. But the NSO purchasers are the purchasers who have outcome requirements that they have to meet. So that's important for us to know that. But other purchasers, even the national purchasers, report back to us on the status of every note they purchase. And starting with the most recent sale, they also have to report back on any notes that they resell in a whole loan sale of their own. So if they buy from us and they sell it out to someone else, they still have to report back to us on the status. It's just that they don't have any outcome that they have to meet other than that 6-month no foreclosure time frame in the very beginning. Yes. Not yet.
To date, no.
To date, no.
But again, a lot of the compliance periods are between 3 and 4 years, depending upon, you know, which sale we're talking about. Back in 2012-3, which was the first larger DASP transaction, our compliance periods were 3 years. That 3 years is yet to be over, so none of these penalties would sort of apply yet. But
Because some of the outcomes, like for instance, if you're in a REO to rental, in order for you to get a credit, you have to have it in rental status for 3 years. And so we wouldn't know whether or not you didn't meet that outcome until almost the end.
right.
So,
A lot of purchasers will maintain a lot of assets in a planned or interim status. So as long as they remain in those categories, then they're not technically out of compliance. And so yeah, just today it hasn't applied.
but that's a good question because it's important for the purchasers internally to track what they're doing and to know that I might have something in a planned status, but are you really going to be able to meet it? Because if you miss if you don't meet those statuses, then you could, at the very end, find out that you're in a penalty situation because you didn't meet the 50%, and you don't know till you're getting close to the end. So it's very important to track what's going on in terms of NSO outcomes with those assets.
Right. So just as the last point on this slide, I think, you know, for this session, which is really about nonprofits, an important point here is that we're obviously monitoring people's NSO resolution rates and outcome rates. And I think when purchasers are having trouble, one of the potential options would be partnerships with nonprofits, particularly nonprofits that are NSP grantees, because as many of you know, that is a sort of accepted NSO outcome right now. So I think that's a potential opportunity for partnership. Okay, so in terms of general reporting instructions and requirements, basically what we ask is for an Excel file on a quarterly basis that includes loan-by-loan status data on the portfolio. It includes reason for foreclosure data. As was mentioned yesterday in the session, one of the features of the program is that there's a 6-month foreclosure avoidance period during which there are certain scenarios that foreclosure would be allowed. Those would have to be reported in this section, right, of your reporting. We also require a summary table from purchasers if they are NSO, if they're NSO purchasers, and that would just sort of report on what percentages of your loans are in each of the NSO categories. So if you have X percent in sale to an owner-occupant, you'd report it in this table. So all of that would be included in an Excel worksheet that you'd send to us. In addition, there are self-certification forms that you'd provide and those are typically sent in PDF format. Again, timeliness is important because in order for us to report out to stakeholders, senior management, and taxpayers, really, we need all of this information in time so that we can process it and really do some analysis, and in some cases reach back out to purchasers to resolve any sort of completeness or data quality issues. So how do we define report completeness? Well, have you submitted everything? Did you provide us the PDFs we need? Did you provide all of the data elements we need, from statuses to performance categories? Additionally, and this has become more and more important as the portfolio has expanded and we're managing more and more data, it's a huge burden to go back to old files, right? So what we like to ask purchasers to do at this point is to send loan-by-loan status data from previous periods in every report, right? So if you purchased loans in 2014-2, for every reporting period, you would provide every single report that you had submitted to date on a given pool, right? In addition, we also would ask for the same thing for the reason for foreclosure data, just because, again, from a data management standpoint, it helps HUD and us to properly analyze the data on time. So the format, I've sort of already discussed this. We require an Excel piece as well as 2 PDF forms. The naming conventions are actually oddly important to us. We ask all purchasers to sort of provide the data with this naming convention and to submit it to assetsales@hud.gov.
And you can also copy me on anything you send. The reason I like that is because we get a lot of mail coming into that asset mail mailbox. So if I'm copied as well, then I'm aware that it probably hit the mailbox already, or at least I have a copy in my mailbox. So just that you know it also went to me. So if you want to copy me, that's fine.
Right. Right, so Marlene really is the point of contact on HUD side, and what's very helpful to us so that we can, if need be, reach back out to purchasers if you provide sort of a point of contact, particularly if that person is someone other than the person submitting the report.
That's a very good point about that, because sometimes we have like a point of contact who's like a principal person, but they're not the person doing the involved in like keeping track of the data and sending in the report. And so we might be communicating with that person, but what we're trying to communicate might not be getting across. So it's important that purchasers at least let us know who's the person to talk to in your shop about these reports, who will be gathering the data, who can, if Jelani and I have to get on the phone with someone, that's the person, because a lot of times that's not the principal person who's the contact name that I have. So that's very, very important.
Right, and any information you can provide in terms of email addresses and phone numbers is
And if
is
something
helpful.
changes, you send it to me, Marlene, this is the person, and we'll make sure I update that in our database of contacts. And the way it works is purchasers don't directly interact with Jelani. He's not going to be emailing you directly. You send it to us, I communicate with him, and then if there are some issues, we'll set up a call with me on the call, the PFA, Jelani's on the call. Occasionally, I might say, yeah, go ahead and send it to them, to him, and he would copy me. But generally speaking, HUD is at the forefront of this and takes the lead, and then he's there with us to resolve issues and what have you, or anybody on your side of the shop.
Right, and as a final note on this slide, sort of everything that we're telling you here is subject to change, particularly in the near term, as we're working on some automation that will, I think, improve our data quality on this side, and will make the process a lot easier for purchasers that are trying to submit data. So look forward to training coming up sort of in the future here. So the reporting templates, what we have been able to do is create data templates that just sort of standardize what you all are submitting and what we expect to see from you all. I've mentioned that those are an Excel piece, and then we provide Word files that you then PDF and submit to us. Okay, so a lot of these slides discuss some of the changes that have taken place in recent months, but I think actually for this session where a lot of the folks in attendance aren't necessarily previous purchasers, and those that probably are aware of the changes that have taken place with the reporting, it may be something that I can skip now. This slide here shows you sort of the individual, the information that we provide to purchasers in terms of what are acceptable responses for different data categories. We provide this in a data dictionary within the data templates that we send to you. So this is information that you will have in the event that reporting becomes a requirement for you. This is the same information sort of continued. You'll see that we require performance categories. We're really interested in loan mods, as I think many of you are also. We request mod dates. We're interested in the types of mods you all are doing. If there are principal write-downs, we'd like to know sort of what the amount there is. And then so there are some differences in the NSO reporting that we require. There are 3 columns in the template that you'll receive as purchasers. We're interested in the NSO category. So what is the current status category with respect to the neighborhood stabilization outcome for a given loan, right? We're interested in what the initial date of your NSO is. We actually want to know when you were able to achieve a final NSO outcome, right? And then we'd like for you to indicate if a loan was ever sort of marketed as REO, which kind of exempts it from ever being considered a final NSO, a neighborhood stabilizing outcome. So then obviously we also require the NSO Summary Table, which provides this kind of information. There are 16 total categories. The first 7 are what we consider final NSOs, so that's mortgage loan reperformance. I believe in order to qualify for this, a loan shouldn't be reported as a final NSO until a loan has reperformed for at least 6 months.
So final means you've achieved whatever the outcome is, it's done. It's reperformed for 6 months, and now it's final. I think it might be important to define what we mean by final, planned.
Sure. So I think, as Marlene's saying, any loan that is reported in a given reporting period as a final NSO outcome, it should be sort of a static thing, right? That loan should never sort of move back into planned NSO or interim status or otherwise. Planned NSOs, on the other hand, we anticipate that some of those loans don't actually end up becoming final NSOs. It's just sort of the approach that the servicer is currently taking on the loan, but you know, ideally all of those loans become final NSOs.
Right.
So just to show the last couple categories, we have an interim status, which is like, usually there's high volumes in interim status in the first reporting period, but then gradually less and less loans would be reported as such. And then for any non-NSO outcome, this would be like a foreclosure a foreclosure or anything else that doesn't sort of apply under the first 7 NSO outcomes would be reported as a number 16. I think it's probably worthwhile to say that one of the NSO outcome categories is number 7, which is disposition in accordance with eligible program. I think this is something that a lot of purchasers don't necessarily understand. Basically, if you have an idea about what you might want to do with a given loan that you believe achieves a neighborhood stabilization outcome, you would apply directly to HUD, send an application to John Lucy and the folks at the asset sales office requesting a waiver or an exception, and it would then, in future reporting periods, be reported as a final NSO number 7.
For example, if you sent us a request, like I'll use this as an example because people have asked about that. If under NSO number 7, which is the purchaser can propose an NSO outcome that they think meets neighborhood stabilization. So if a purchaser says, I want to sell a certain number of notes to a nonprofit, and the nonprofit is going to be doing this, they would send us a proposal, so to speak. It's somewhat formal process for us to review. And so that's what Jelani is talking about. If we agree and HUD says, okay, yes, we'll make this exception, purchaser can move forward, execute this sale, the purchaser will then have to report back to us on the status of those loans they've sold to the nonprofit, what's going on with them, and they would report that back under that final NSO category that Jelani's talking about. If the nonprofit is going to be modifying those loans, even though it's a mod, it's still coming in under that final NSO number 7. So we're tracking the exceptions that we gave and what happened under those exceptions with the notes. Did the purchaser achieve the goals that they said in what they proposed to us is really what we're trying to get to.
Right, and so there's two other points that I'd like to make about all this data that we're asking for, right? Number one, this information is private information. So if you provide it to us, there's been a slew of people that have requested data from the asset sales office, and the only information that ever does leave is information that's not private information. So we consider this information private. Additionally, it's important to note that any sort of nonprofit partnership that leads to a nonprofit taking over loans, those loans, the reporting requirements follow those loans. So we would still request that the purchasers report on these loans because it's still very important to us to understand what's happening to them. So just to get sort of a view of what our NSO summary table looks like, this is what it looks like. Very simple to put together. We request counts and percents of total. This is sort of an example of what our reason for foreclosure data looks like, what we're asking for. And again, we would like this to be reported forward in every report. You just sort of provide whatever the reason is. It's usually vacancy, but if there's something else, you'd provide just a narrative explanation of what it was. And then this is kind of an example of some of the information we provide in our training. We provide quality control protocols that we recommend purchasers use in order to sort of avoid any completeness or compliance issues going forward, which, as Marlene mentioned, can sort of result in a barring from participation in future sales. So I think it's really important that people kind of employ some quality control protocols. And so really this touches on the certifications. There are different self-certification forms depending upon the kind of purchaser, whether it's a national or NSO purchaser. And so we require a servicer eligibility certification for the national and NSO sales, but we only require the asset management eligibility for NSO sales. So that's something to keep in mind. And then we also require the foreclosure avoidance for national and NSO sales. So that really concludes the information we wanted to give you guys on the reporting side.
And we can take any questions now that you may have about reporting.
Yes, clarification. If a purchaser sells to a nonprofit and it's deemed an NSO outcome, or if a nonprofit purchases REO, which is not an NSO outcome, does the nonprofit inherit the reporting requirements, or does the original purchaser still have reporting requirements? How does
The
that work?
original purchaser will still have to report to us, because your agreement to purchase is between you and the purchaser, not us. We agree to what the purchaser has proposed. So the purchaser would probably put some reporting requirements on you, so you can report to them, so they can report to us.
Okay. In either case.
So,
Whether-
but if
whether
you
it was-
purchase on your own, then you would have a CAA with HUD. And
No,
your
understood.
CAA would have your reporting requirements in it, right, as a nonprofit. So you'd be submitting reports directly to us. If you purchased it, let's say a purchaser proposed to us under NSO number 7 that they want to do an alternative, and the alternative is to sell to a nonprofit. That purchaser is still going to have to report to us on their report that they send us what happens with these loans. It's not just, I sold it to a nonprofit and that's it, I'm done. They still have to tell us what the status of these loans are for the remainder of the time.
Got it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
In a situation like that, do you guys take into consideration when looking at the results, the type or the slice of the portfolio that's being sold? So, for example, if the nonprofit bids on a chunk of notes, and these notes were, say, the bottom of the barrel, all slated for foreclosure, no contact for 24 months, or vacant, or borrower's deceased, when we report back, how do, and you know, the majority goes
Are you
forward.
saying this is an NSO
Yeah,
sale, and
NSO.
you found out after purchase that the majority of these notes, because you would know when you're going through the diligence, you'd be able to see what's vacant and what have you, but you're saying that you had a lot of vacancy and then you weren't able to convert it back to NSO Outcomes, or?
No, so in the scenario you were just talking about where an NSO buyer sells a pool of notes to a nonprofit.
Uh-huh.
And
Oh, okay.
In that scenario,
Okay.
yeah, as an NSO outcome. And the nonprofit reviews the notes and agrees on a price, knowing the fact that it was a selected, probably negative select slice of the portfolio, that high probability that most of it will have to go to real estate for an NSO type outcome. How do you measure?
That purchaser is still required to meet 50% NSO, so that 50% requirement is on our purchaser, not on you who purchased from them.
And
So, but when they complete the sale, do they get an NSO credit?
No, not for just completing the sale to you, but they still have to report outcomes on all the notes they purchased. And we're looking to see that 50% of those notes met a final NSO outcome. It could be through a purchase to you that they meet that outcome, meaning you purchased from them, and let's say you modify that note, or you did an REO to rental and you kept it in rental for the time period, or you, I don't know, you did a short sale or whatever the nonprofit did with it. As long as it met an NSO outcome, that purchaser can get credit for that outcome through you, whatever the agreement they
But
have
I
with
think-
you.
I think that from our standpoint, the loan meets the NSO requirement when it meets the NSO requirement.
Right.
Your relationship with the original buyer, the point really is that it's of no sort of consequence. Like,
Right.
unless that transaction itself represents an NSO outcome, which, like, if they grant it to an NSP grantee, right, or sell to an NSP grantee, that actually in itself applies as an NSO outcome.
Right.
After which point it would be a final NSO, and that would be again a static thing.
Right. But
If it's an NSP sub-grantee, then there's no need for that continuing report because,
well, they would continue to report that it met the final in all the future reports they send us until the reporting period ends.
but that at NSP sub-grantee, would they still have to meet that 50% requirement?
Okay. I think it's just a little bit of a confusion. So,
Okay.
So let's say you have an entire pool, like 100 loans, right? 30 of them you were able to achieve an NSO outcome via a deed in lieu sale to owner occupant. Another 20 you identified an NSP grantee who could take those off your hands, right? Then you would meet your NSO outcome requirement.
yeah, and that would be final. But in order, okay, so NSP grantee, though, it's not like automatic. You don't just say identify and you do it. You still have to send something to HUD saying this is the NSP grantee and I'm going to, sell these notes to this NSP grantee. So we can make sure that that really is an NSP grantee and do our due diligence on our side. But once that's done, you can claim a final NSO for that, yes. Okay. But getting back to your point is, if you buy notes from our purchaser still has to report back to us. Now, if those notes that they sold to you ended up with an NSP grantee, our purchaser can report to us a final NSO for that. That makes sense. Yes.
Question, let's say you have a note, the foreclosure, can you sell the REO? It's not a note anymore, it's an REO. Can you sell that to an NSP grantee and have that then, can that sort of wash out the foreclosure as a non-NSO?
I believe that's yes.
I believe the
Yes,
answer to that is yes,
yes.
but I'd like to sort of reserve
Reserve
the
that,
right
to check that.
to
Double-
revise
yeah,
the answer.
yes.
I believe the answer is yes. And so that actually represents like one of two ways in which a foreclosure can still be considered an NSO outcome. Also, if it's held for rental, as I think I think one of the panelists yesterday said that's one of their sort of preferred resolution approaches. Yeah, those are the two
So,
ways.
so under the current guidelines, those are only two ways the REO could get credit for an NSO outcome. And of course, if anything changes with respect to NSO outcomes or what is HUD doing, we'll definitely communicate that out and set up purchaser training and inform you of, how that affects the reporting and what the impact of the changes are and what we want you to do. Well, thank you all very much for your attention this morning. I didn't think this would be so interesting, but everybody was like, thank you.
Okay, so we don't have a break scheduled. We're kind of just on time for the 9:45. We're going to have the asset sales team are all going to join us up here for the Q&A and debrief, so give us a couple of seconds to get some folks in here.